Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and very welcome to this artist talk where we have invited our very important guest, Ramia El Agamy. She holds an MSc in International Business and Management from Manchester's Business School, UK. She was born and raised in Switzerland, and she's of Dutch and Egyptian descent. And currently, she lives between Bern, Switzerland, Dubai, and she speaks 6 languages, which is really amazing. And Ramya is the co-founder of Orbis Terra Media, which is an international content making studio and publishing house, which is based in Switzerland. And she's also an editor-in-chief of Terra magazine, the global publication for family businesses, and works alternately in sorry, I will repeat that. She is an editor-in-chief of Terra magazine, the global publication for family businesses, and this is a product which is established by her own family. And as a director of her family's enterprise, has helped expand its activities globally and works alternately in media, cross-border entrepreneurship, and family business. And her role as an editor-in-chief and co-founder of Terra magazine and podcast host of the Family Business Voice and Women in Family Business has allowed her to specialize in topics which are relevant to business owners and their successes. So in the beginning, Ramya will present, and then we will start questioning around that what she talks about around business, not, but especially in post-COVID times and the business related to technology or whatever she likes to talk about. So over to you, Ramya, now. You can present now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think we just hit a little bit of a snag there with the computer, but I think we're back now. So this is the disadvantage when you try to use fancy technology on a presentation. There's always a risk of it going terribly wrong. But hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be invited here in front of you all. I think there's nothing more powerful that excites me more than be amongst a group of women to talk about the future of the economy and entrepreneurship, my favorite topics ever. And so because I just said it a little bit for the ones that were already there in the little bit of a preamble chat that we had before, I don't really like to talk about myself that much, but I will do my best. And especially, I hope that you guys will have just basically questions for me as well after my presentation, or also during my presentation if something isn't clear. I actually thought so. Zarin very kindly sent me questions that she thinks I should try to answer here today. And I actually thought it would be more interesting for me to start not with myself or with my family and my family business, which I'll talk to you guys about in a few minutes. But I thought, let me start by telling you how we currently see the world and the economy, basically. And you can call this post-COVID, pre-COVID, whatever you want. I think that I've been personally talking about these particular trends for about 2-3 years now. And I don't think that they've necessarily changed because of COVID, but I think that they've become accelerated and maybe are happening even faster than we anticipated. So I just want to talk a little bit in the beginning here about what it means to be an entrepreneur in the time we live in. So, and what does that mean for you in terms of the opportunities that you might have that you might not have had even a few years ago, and also how that sort of positions you guys in terms of when you graduate. I don't know where you are at in your studies, a couple of years, in a year or so, whenever you graduate, I think you can be very excited about what's out there, but also I will share with you a few of the lessons that I had to learn the hard way. And I think the hard way is nice, it builds character, but I think sometimes it would have been nice if someone had told me beforehand maybe what was waiting on the other side. So I think maybe I can do that for some of you guys. Some of the things I've had to learn the hard way, maybe you guys can just, avoid it altogether or do it differently from the start with what I'm telling you here today. So hopefully that's that. I just want to, one quick disclaimer I want to put forward here. I speak from the perspective of an entrepreneur because I am an entrepreneur and I'm what you call a born entrepreneur. For me, it's very hard to imagine doing anything else ever. I just want to be very clear about it, and I'll repeat this again. I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. And I also don't think that everybody needs to feel like it's a bad thing if it's not for them, because I think we live in a time where we romanticize entrepreneurship. And as you will see through my presentation, it is a very difficult thing to do. And you have to be very clear about what it means in terms of sacrifices and in terms of a type of a drive. And I'll love to talk to you guys as well about the hybrid options that you have between full-on entrepreneurship, full-on employment. We live today, fortunately, in a world where you will not have to make an either-or decision probably anymore. Okay, so please let me know in case anything malfunctions, and I'll just continue talking though. So raise your hands, or I don't know, Zarin, maybe you can help moderate here if you see that people have comments. I'll just focus in getting into the presentation mode now. Okay, so
just one thing, Ramia, can you just make it a little bigger because I can't see the screen. Girls, can you see the screen clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine then. Yeah, that's to do with my glasses then.
I think it's if you maybe pin me to speaker view or something like that, it should be like a normal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I called this being an entrepreneur in the new economy, right? And so how to build your competitive advantage in a disruptive age. So I want to talk a little bit about the world that we live in. And I think what's really important for everyone to understand nowadays is I understand that COVID has taken over a lot of our narrative and that it's been an extraordinary experience. Extraordinary on so many levels. I mean, first of all, experiencing a symmetrical shock, as we call it in economic terms, of that magnitude is probably a once in a lifetime occurrence, guys. So also be aware that this is probably not going to happen again, or not to this extent in your lifetime. This is an incredible, unprecedented level of simultaneous shock to the whole ecosystem. And that's raised a lot of very interesting questions. But I think at the most underlying level, we've been dealing with a very complex world, and a world that's increasing in complexity for quite a while, actually since pretty much the beginning of this century. And we talk about the new economy because this new economy is defined by new types of drivers and megatrends. As you all know, we have different problems this century than we had last century, but we also have different tools this century than we did last century. So when I say problems, obviously, we're facing humongous challenges in terms of climate change. We're facing massive challenges in terms of wealth inequality. As you all know, there's a lot to be done between the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing, which is a very bad thing to happen. We're also facing an increasing challenge, I would say, in understanding how the disruption of technology impacts our societal living. So there's a lot of things that for today we all need to make sense of. And the thing is that unfortunately, I'm a big proponent, and this is maybe going to tire some of you guys, but I'm a big proponent of the fact that even if you're not actively part of it, you need to understand this today, because it's very important to understand what kind of a world you live in, and also what kind of a world, what kind of an economy you are a consumer in, let alone that you're an entrepreneur or build your own business. But at the very least, you're a consumer in these economies, and you need to understand how these forces are at interplay. Personally, I think one of the most defining traits of the new economy is the fact that this new economy is defined by these new technologies. And so new technologies being a relative term, because as you all know, developments towards artificial intelligence have taken 50, 60 years to get to the point where they are today. I know everyone talks about AI today as if it's new. It took us near to more than half a century to get to the point where we are today. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think it's just a really interesting thing, isn't it? If you think about the vocabulary that we need to be aware of today, as women in business or as women in education or as women in our careers, right? The vocabulary that we need to understand the new economy is this kind of vocabulary. What is big data? How does it influence your decision making? What is artificial intelligence? What is machine learning? Why are we an information society? So a society that uses information, that where the use of information is a key activity, if not the key activity that's going to allow us to add value. What do we talk about when we talk about singularity? And I'll explain that in a moment. And then quantum computing, which is a whole different chapter, which I'm not going to open today because we're going to go, it's going to become a big nerd off. But I think that this is like, I mean, and most of you girls, I'm sure, are aware of these things. But this is all happening and coming right now at a very quick pace. Today, what I want to encourage you to believe is that this is not happening to you. You are part of this. Okay, so I think that a lot of people, when they see these terms, when they think new economy, when they think post-COVID economy, I hear them talking about it as if it's something that is happening to them. What are we going to be faced with? At your age and with your abilities in this generation, I really want you to be encouraged to think about it as, what are we going to shape this into? Okay, you have an active role to play. And I really want you to empower to start thinking about it that way, because I feel like we think about ourselves too much in a passive role as economic actors, as opposed to in an active role in where we can influence the outcome of how these technologies are being used. Now, most of what I'm mentioning here, you're already using. You're all using artificial intelligence on a daily basis. You're all contributing to big data, which is, you know, I'll show you guys afterwards what happens within a minute on the internet. Like, I'm sure you have seen these numbers. You're all contributing to it. You're all part of the information society already. The question is, how aware are you of the fact that you are? How aware are you when these things are being used or deployed within your system? And you're all using software. So I don't need to tell you guys that machine learning and AI is embedded in almost every single software that you're using today, starting with any messenger that you're using. Okay, so these are all really interesting things that we force, and probably people your age as well, who like, I'm quite a bit older now than you guys already, but you were all really born into an age where this was, many of these things were already there. So now I think Zarin and I maybe have the advantage that we remember a time. I remember when the internet was installed in my home. So I remember a time, fair enough, I was young, but like I remember a time without internet in my life. And I think that big transition, that's why I think we as a generation, like the millennials, as you call us, are very hyper aware of these changes and are sort of like aware as well of that there's currently a very small group of people who actually understand what's going on at this level of tech. And I'll tell you guys in a little while as well, like why I think that is dangerous and why I want women to take a much more active role in this understanding. And that means understanding it means be able to shape it so that we don't fall into a victim role where we are being imposed things upon again, but where we get to shape the future of our world and of our economies in equal ways. Okay? So why do we talk about this time being like fast paced? I'm sure you've all heard this, right? Like, I mean, who hasn't? I mean, I don't know, like maybe raise your hand if you've heard people say this. This is a very fast changing, fast paced time. Everything's changing. One hand raised. No one else has ever heard this? No? Okay. Some of you, yeah, okay. So the thing is, like, I hear this all the time, right? Like people say, you know, it's changing so fast. Oh my God, what's happening? Like everything is going so fast. And, you know, I really wanted to understand whether this is true. Is it true that it's changing faster than it did before? Or is it always like that? Is it always that, you know, the older generation always says to the younger generation, things are changing too fast? Maybe it's always been like that. Maybe even 600 years people used to say that to each other. But there is actually kind of scientific proof for the fact that we are in fact living in a time where things change at what we like to call an exponential speed now. And I'll show you guys what I mean by this. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns. Is anyone familiar with this? No? Raise your, you can raise your hand if you guys are. Like, I hope I don't bore anyone in case you already know this, but like, I mean, I've read about this 100 times and I'm still super fascinated by it, right? Like, so the thing is that Kurzweil, he's a scientist and he's what we call a futurist. So Kurzweil, by the way, is also like one of the people who helped invent image scanning technology. So he's a really big deal in the scientific community, right? Like, so he's a very important person. So, and he is the one who brought forward this table. Now, let me tell you guys a little bit more about this, okay? I'm gonna fade myself out so you can read it. So, what does this mean? So if you just please zoom in for me here at the top, here at number 1, the accelerating pace of change. Okay, so what do we mean when we say things are moving faster? To give you some context, right? The agricultural revolution meaning when human beings stopped being nomads and wandering around, but started becoming sedentary and started using agriculture as a means of building prosperity, etc. Between that moment in time in human history and the Industrial Revolution, when we started manufacturing at scale, etc., which is 2 centuries ago, 8,000 years elapsed. It took us 8,000 years as humankind to go from agricultural revolution to industrial revolution. Now, 8,000 years, that's not a wink of an eye, that's a long time. But between the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the light bulb, it only took us 120 years. Between the light bulb and the moon landing, it only took us 90 years. Between the moon landing and the internet, it took us 22 years. And between the internet and being able to sequence and read DNA, which is probably one of the most complex things human beings have ever achieved, it only took us 9 years. So this is an accelerated pace of change, which Kurzweil then says, and is seconded by an exponential growth in computing power. Now, you all know this, like you all use computers every day. I don't know how many of you actually sometimes question how these machines are actually capable of doing the things that they're capable of, right? Like, so we're all taking these machines very much for granted. The computing power that you currently have in your phone, right, that you are holding in your phone is basically more than a computer, an actual desktop computer, even like 10 years ago. So the ability of computers to process data, to compute data, has exponentially increased. And it started actually in the beginning of the 20th century, 1900, it started with what the analytic engine, which was like a very simple decoding machine, basically, led towards in the 1940s, and this was very important to us here in Europe, in the 1940s, it led to the building of Colossus. Colossus was the first computer-type machine, which was actually invented as a defense against the Nazis, because it was there to try to decode Nazi transmissions. Okay, so it was there to try and decode, like, I don't know how many of you have seen Enigma, that movie maybe, or a more recent one. So anyways, there's a lot of, I'm not going to try and bore you guys with this stuff. It's fascinating though. So they did it out of the defense, the need to defend themselves. And so, but then the first actual computer was then issued in the 1950s, 60s, and that was UNIVAC. And UNIVAC was the first commercial computer that came out, right? Like, and UNIVAC, you have to imagine, the UNIVAC computer, one computer would take a whole room to be one computer. What you have now in your laptop, what you have now in your phone, would take a whole room of machines to do. So computing power used to take space. Now computing power is happening on nano chips that you can't even, like, you can barely see them. They look like a speck, right? Like, to you guys. Then came the Apple computer as the first sort of like personal computer, of course, and then the Power Mac G4 after that. So Kurzweil now says the following things. So as you guys see, like, you see this little tail that goes up here, and you see the 10-fold, 10 by 20, 10 by 26. This curve is what we call like a hockey stick curve, right? Like it's when we see exponential growth. So you see the gradual growth here, and then there's an inflection point where the growth becomes almost vertical, right? Like, so what does that mean? So Kurzweil's hypothesis is machines will surpass the brain power of mice in 2015. They have. We're past that point already. He says it will surpass the brain power of humans in 2023. Okay. And according to Kurzweil, in 2045, it will surpass the brain power equivalent to that of all human beings combined.
Oh, wow.
And this is what we call the moment of singularity. This is when he believes, and I'm saying he believes because of course we cannot say that this is true yet, he believes this is when artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence. All right? So whether you believe this or not, whether you think this is true or not, whether you think this is fantastic or not, you are currently, with everything you're doing online, actively contributing to this becoming a reality. Your every behavior that you're doing that is being traced, your every share that you make on social media, everything shapes towards this because it keeps on feeding into the data. So let me manifest this for you guys in actual real numbers. And this is actually 2018. This is really actually a long time ago. Can everyone see this graphic? Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. So here you go. So this is a graphic that showed, this is from Domo, this was 2018. And it's called, this graphic is issued every year, by the way. So I encourage you guys to keep an eye out for it. Like they've already issued the 2020. I haven't had time to update it, unfortunately, but I'm sure that there would have been like massive increases in number, but already in 2018, this is what it looked like, right? Like imagine this. In every minute of every day, this is the activity happening on the internet. Okay? So in every minute, over 1 million GIFs are being served. Okay? In every minute, I don't know how many of you guys still use Snapchat or not, like over 2 million snaps are created, okay? Over 3.8 million searches, Google searches are being conducted in every minute, okay? Like this is, if you think about that per minute, that's an extraordinary amount of activity. And all of you guys have contributed at least to some of these things, right? Like, so you're all part of it. And this is what I always want to tell people. No one is exempt of this happening. This is not happening to us. We're active actors in this. And this is also something to be very aware of. We need to take responsibility for the fact that we are contributing to it. And that's why it's so important to understand it, right? Like to understand. And this is not a, by the way, I'm like a big proponent of technology. I'm a big technologist to my heart. I love what this is enabling us to do. But I'm also someone who says this is the most dangerous thing to happen to our cultures, to human society, if it is not properly understood and if men and women don't get to shape it equally. This is one of those situations. Yes, this is one of those situations where I feel there can be no tolerance for gender inequality. Men and women have to have a say in how this shapes our future. Okay? So just in case this hasn't impressed you enough, I'm just going to explain to you just quickly what the next stage is, though, because it's important, right? Like, because you have to understand, like, whether you want to become an artist or a designer or someone who works with their hands, right? This still concerns you. All right, I'll tell you why. Like, I mean, some of you guys might have felt like, oh, but Ramia, you know, I want to be like a fashion designer. I want to work with my hands, or like I want to like sew and stuff like that. You know what? This is still important. You know why? Because whatever you decide to do, however you create your product or how you design your service that you want to give as an entrepreneur, this is the world your customers live in. And your customers' needs and your customers' world, that's the world that you need to focus on as an entrepreneur. And I'll talk about that a little bit more afterwards, where as an entrepreneur, the biggest thing is that you need to transition from what you think is important to the life that your customer lives. Your customer lives inside this world. So you need to understand it. And that world is about to change even more, because now comes IoT, the Internet of Things. Now, guys, this is going to be a whole different thing altogether again. This is going to be insane, okay? So the Internet of Things, as you all know probably by now, is characterized by the fact that currently, I don't know if you realize, or not that much anymore, actually, already it's started to transition, but we used to have a human interaction between objects. So for me to transfer information from one object to another, you need a human, right? Like to do this. Now, again, you're all much younger than me, so probably you're already used to the fact that when you enter something here, it will sync it there. And it will sync it there as well. And when you log in different places, you will find the same information, right? Now, we're going to go towards an even further level of this, meaning that objects and things in your life are going to start talking to each other without you having to mediate it, right? Your fridge is going to tell you when your milk is low. Your oven is going to open the garage door when it knows that you're ready to leave the house. Okay, I'm giving you weird examples, but like just to give you an idea. This is kind of where we're going towards. We're going towards a perfect integration where the objects around the person start interacting at such a rate and at such a predictive, with such a predictive ability that your life is going to look very, very different, basically. And so we're talking in 2020, said like already 50.1 billion objects are talking to each other, basically, worldwide, which is huge and which is going to continue changing. See, you have here another one of those hockey stick curves, right? So this is going to continue accelerating now. And all the technological developments that you see these days are all going to feed that. This is important. This is important for you to understand, because you need to understand that in a time like this, your privacy and your own data, you have to know how to protect it. Okay? And here I'm just giving a little segue here amongst us as women here, okay? And I'm taking full advantage of the fact that this is purely women in this conversation. And this is not against this is not against men in any way, but we have to understand where we are, okay? Like, we are in a situation where our vulnerability is still high, okay?
Exactly.
There's a still high level of vulnerability. There's still a high risk when we expose ourselves, and there's a high risk of judgment, of failure, etc., and of coming from outside. I'll talk about the pressures in a second. So I want everyone to sort of be aware of the fact that in this kind of time, again, understand how to protect yourself. See, I will tell you very honestly, guys, like right now, there are at least 4 of my devices actively listening to me and probably recording what I'm saying. My watch, my phone, both these computers. And you officially, as that's on top of the official recording that you're making of what I'm saying right now here, right, Zarin? So I think this is something that maybe all of you guys also, because you were born into, have never really questioned. But start thinking about the fact that currently there's no law that helps you reclaim your data. The moment you've given your data anywhere online, you currently do not have the right to get it back.
Oh,
okay. So yes, there have been whole lawsuits about this, that, you know, people have not been able to reclaim their data from online sources. So I know these are things that we don't tend to question, but I tell you something, these are ethical discussions around technology that we need to be having, and that you as the next generation of entrepreneurs need to contribute to. Okay? So now, what does all of this mean for all of us entrepreneurs, right? Like the big consequences of this new economy for all of us. So we're dealing with very disrupted industries, and I'm going to talk about your opportunities as, you know, young women who are about to enter the job market, or young women who are about to start their own businesses, or maybe we can also have a chat about young women who join their family businesses potentially. Hopefully there are some of you who got invited by their families as well. So we have disrupted industries, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I work in media. We get disrupted every 2 weeks, basically. So it's like, it's constantly, I haven't slept in about 15 years. So like, just FYI, maybe don't choose my industry. Maybe don't do it. So then we have the disruption to society, which I just explained to you guys, right? Like your privacy. how you consume things, where you consume them, what are the ethical, like sort of like ramifications of these things. How much of your house is connected to the internet, like how much of your house is actually cloud-based, etc. This also leads to disrupted thinking. And here, I want you all to just be super validated in the fact that you chose a design-based degree or an arts-based degree. Well done. Your way of thinking is going to be one of the most thought after ways of thinking in the next 10 to 15 years. If you know how to position yourself right, if you speak this language, you're going to become the most sought after talent in the economy. Okay, and I'll tell you guys a little bit more about why I believe that. And I'm happy to be challenged on this, by the way, if you guys feel like this is not true. So the entrepreneurial opportunities are very concrete, right? Like, so if when we talk about entrepreneurship, like, let's be very honest here. Entrepreneurship, I'd love to tell you guys, like, you know what, follow your passion. It's awesome. And stuff. Like, don't do it. Don't follow your passion. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Like, this is not how entrepreneurship works. Follow your passion, but don't necessarily think that that means that that has to turn into a business, okay? An entrepreneur solves problems. An entrepreneur is someone who sees a problem in the marketplace, applies their skills to solving that problem, and turns that solving that problem into a product or a service, okay? That's the simple truth of it. It's not necessarily always beautiful or flashy or fun, but that is entrepreneurship, okay? It's the ability to spot that problem and the ability to apply a solution to it and to come out with the best solution for it, and then the ability to commercialize that, okay? Very often, funnily enough, it has very little to do with the original passion of the person going into it. You need your passion to drive you. You need your passion to sustain you because it's hard work. But please never, always question, if you say, I'm going to build a business based on my passion, always ask yourself, that might be just you. That might be just your passion. That might have nothing to do with the reality out there. And so be careful with that, because we are very keen in saying this. And I actually think that it's not really a fair thing to do. I think someone has a question. Is that Mumina?
Amina Devi.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to ask a question. You said that both male and female should contribute their part and should become independent to men. But the opportunities given to women nowadays are not that much than the men. We are, I think there is still gender discrimination between nowadays. We think that we are in the situation where society has given right to females, but they are not given that much right which they give to men.
Thank you.
Still thinks that women don't get that much opportunity if they are compared to like men.
Yes, so I'm not, like, I agree with you 100%, and you'll understand from my cultural background and also the fact that I'm married to a Pakistani, I understand perfectly where you're coming from, okay? So I want to be very clear here though. The opportunities is what you make of it. If we're gonna sit here and wait until we get equal opportunities, it's not gonna happen. We are at a disadvantage. This is absolutely true. It is not equal and it is not fair. And it sucks, okay? And I'm the first one to admit that. And you know, I'll be happy to share with you the many instances where people have told me flat out to my face, you're a woman, no way. You're a woman, I want to talk to your father, I don't want to talk to you.
Oh God.
You're a woman, you're just a woman, okay? You're a woman, just, you know, focus on getting married and having children. All of that stuff, like, you know, I get that. I actually still get that. I get it on a daily basis. I get it from women and men, actually, interestingly enough. I'll talk about that. So I totally agree with you, but I'll also tell you one thing right now. is never going to be fair, is never going to be equal. So what is very important is to understand, to look for the right opportunities to set yourself up for success from the beginning. Okay? Honestly, I've wasted a lot of time thinking about how unfair it is, and it's not a good way to spend your energy. That's my feeling. Does that make sense to you what I'm saying here? Like, I'll give you more like ideas of how, like, the sort of mindset shifts afterwards. Does that make sense?
I would also like to add, Ramya, that in terms of like technologically skilled, many men are not skilled enough, like the girls who are studying at this course. So they are far ahead of them. So they should make that the use of that opportunity, and they shouldn't they should think that they are far ahead of them, so they shouldn't lose this opportunity at this time. And as you said that we are already in this scenario that we are contributing to it, so it means that if you plan strategically, then you can go far ahead of them who are already in the technology or whatever, because you will know about this, that what is happening. So you were right that if you know about that, that also contributes to your contribution to new world or new technology.
And I want to just be very mindful here of everyone understanding where I'm coming from with this. I'm not saying that any of this is easy. And I'm not saying, and I think, like, you know, if when you, and hopefully you can all stay in touch with me, if you get to know me better, you'll understand how many sacrifices I've had to make and how much I've had to let people say to me, people threaten me, people, like, you know, threaten me with leaving or disowning me and stuff like that because of the choices that I made. And it is not easy, but it's also about whether you are willing to make these sacrifices, but also whether you are willing to be smart about it, right? Like, I'm showing you here an opportunity to gain a competitive advantage without anyone even noticing.
Yes.
And let's face it, ladies, like, they all get really upset when they see us do it. Right? Like, you know, and we women, like, and there's a big sort of like argument to be made that visibility is very important. Like, you know, women should be visibly represented in a lot of places. But there's an even bigger argument to be made as what should be happening behind the scenes. If we are not so obsessed with just being seen as being successful, being seen everywhere, being visible to everyone in our success, but if we just do it, I'm telling you, this is our time. And this is really from someone who's seen the before and after almost of this, right? Like, so I really believe in all of you. I believe in all of your ability to do this, in spite of the seemingly insurmountable emotional challenges that are before you when faced with this. I'm talking facing rejection of your own family. I'm talking facing rejection of the marketplace, of your teachers, facing rejection every day, all the time. And I appreciate, don't get me wrong, I'm not making light of this. I appreciate what that's like, right? Like, so I don't want anyone to think here that I'm saying that this is easy in any way, because it would literally take away from also my journey, because it wasn't easy. It isn't easy. It is every day. It's difficult. And I just had an instance last week where like a white man booked a call with me on purpose to jump down my throat for 20 minutes, mansplaining things to me and stuff like that. So listen, this is going to keep on happening, and I just encourage you to understand, to ignore it as much as you can, right? So just to come back to, like, what kind of a sort, I just want to just talk, I mean, I'm sorry if anyone has raised their hand again, like, if you want to raise your hand again, if you have anything to add to that, please do. Here we have, like, the entrepreneurial opportunities, right? Like, that you're facing as well. So the fact is that all of these big industries that you can be part of later on, like whether as an entrepreneur or as an employee of a company, are being disrupted, right? So they need people like you right now. They need people who can think as designers, as artists, because they need creative people now, okay? So gone are the times, this is really your time in that respect. Gone are the times where only accountants would get stable jobs, and it was only best to be a lawyer, an accountant, or a civil engineer. These times are basically over now. Your degrees are going to play a huge role, because you're being taught the way of thinking, a type of thinking that is hugely important for a lot of the biggest companies in the world right now. So I've shown you, I want to show you guys this graph, right? This graph shows you the risk of disruption. Okay, so the risk of disruption. So if you see, like, you see the industries, you see the industry names here, like manufacturing, transportation, etc. The top 10 companies in the world are going to be dethroned, right? And this is the rate at which that's more likely. So for instance, in media entertainment, the industry that I'm part of, okay, the top 10 companies in the world are going to be dethroned in the next 10 years. What does that mean? You will see big names like, I'm not saying that particular name, but big names like Disney disappear and new names rise. It's already happening in media. I don't know if you guys are aware of this whole, like, you know, obviously what Netflix has done, like, you know, with the whole Disney Plus and all these streaming services that we have. That's one of those wars where you can see that suddenly newcomers will totally disrupt the industry and will come out on top. As an entrepreneur, that excites me. It excites me not because I believe any of us, it's very rare that anyone will build a unicorn, right? Like a unicorn is like a $1 billion business, right? Like, and that's not what's needed. But what's exciting about this is that it will make people think differently about what is established. You will get less of that, you know, that argument. I don't know if this comes across you guys. I get this a lot from people saying like, oh, but that already exists, and this brand already does the best possible version of this, right? Like of this product or this service. And it discourages people from trying new things. It discourages them from trying to add to, like, build their own businesses. And I think that this time of change, where you'll see so many of those big established names also disappearing, is a big opportunity for you, right? Like, because it means that your new ideas will be very welcomed. And maybe there's even a way for you to, if you don't want to be an entrepreneur entirely on your own, but you also don't want to be an employee, for you guys from the creative backgrounds, there's a real opportunity to become what we call an intrapreneur, okay? So an intrapreneur is someone who's basically taking an entrepreneurial role inside an established business, okay? And this is starting to happen everywhere in the world. I know it started happening in Pakistan as well, and I'm sure this is going to catch on really fast. It means that essentially a company hires you to disrupt things, to change things, to start a project, to start a new project inside the company. And they'll need people like you who are capable of giving these things shape, right? Because someone who's only studied finances, like, they'll be very important, but they can't do what you guys can do. They can't do what you guys can do. So it's a fantastic degrees. The degrees that you're getting are fantastic, and they're very key. And even though you don't have to, obviously, like I never did, it's not about like actually working necessarily exactly in the lane that you're studying right now. So don't feel insecure if you're actually feeling like, well, you know what, once I'm done studying this, I actually don't want to have anything to do with it anymore, which is understandable too. I had that feeling after my business degree. But I think that what you have as an opportunity is that this has taught you how to think out of the box. This has taught you how to be creative. This creativity, right? Creativity is the biggest asset. Creativity, and I would say implementation capability, but we'll talk about that in a moment because that's also important. So just briefly, guys, about my family, I like putting these family pictures. Okay, so just as a maybe quick reminder, obviously, my father is Egyptian, my mom is Dutch, and now my husband's Pakistani. So I have a fair mix of cultures in my life. Yeah. Yes. And I was born and raised in Switzerland. So you have to understand where I'm coming from. I come from a mindset of survival. Okay? Because we are an immigrant family. Okay, my father came from nothing. He built himself up entirely on his own. And he's done extraordinarily well. And I think that, you know, when you come from really very little or nothing, it's a very impressive journey, right? Like, and as a second generation that we joined him in the businesses, my sisters and I, so we're 3 girls in the second generation. So that's also why I'm passionate about the women's topic, as you can all imagine, because we're constantly confronted with it. So I think that this is a very beautiful story of my parents, and we got them to join the businesses. And the thing is that because we're a multicultural family, and because we live across countries, and because we are so kind of such a weird mix, I have one big advantage that I'm aware of. I never belonged anywhere or to anyone anyways, right? I was the outsider to start with. So honestly, I'll grant you all that. I had very little to lose by becoming an entrepreneur because I was already the outlier. I was already the outsider. I understand that it's harder to sort of like start thinking outside of your box or to start behaving differently when you are well established within your family setting, your cultural setting, your societal settings, and we'll talk about that as well because I appreciate that. So for me, that aspect has definitely been something that's been easier and that I know is hard for other people. So we basically, my dad started a business in the 1991 and he built that big. Then we joined him in 2008. We started different businesses. Our businesses are very much focused on education and content, really. So my father asked me to start a magazine in 2008, which I did without asking any questions, which was silly of me. I just said like, sure, which was not the smartest thing to do. So when I told you guys before, like, you know, ask yourself if the market wants your product and don't just start. Yeah, I made all of those mistakes. So that's why I get to say this. I really did. Like, it was horrible, guys. Like, you know, such a stupid idea to begin with. And yet, like, you know, here we are, like, you know, a few, like over 12 years later, and we're still there. We're still going strong. Like, you know, your magazine is still there. And we're very proud of it. But the learning curve was painful. It was painful because I became an entrepreneur without knowing that I was an entrepreneur. I didn't treat it like a startup. I just started doing stuff and everything. And don't get me wrong, I think that's largely what your 20s are for. But the fact that we were able to build out of this, like, probably the largest publication in the world on the topic of family businesses with millions of readers every year, I attribute to a lot of luck, me being incredibly stubborn, and me not sleeping for years and years on end, basically. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that I knew what I was doing because I didn't. And I'm here also to tell you that I think that anyone who tells you afterwards is like, oh, I knew exactly what I was doing. I call, sorry to swear here, Zarin, I call bullshit, okay? Because you
can't know. You can't
know. It's always a risk. And so, like, for me, like, there came a pivotal moment. I think the first conscious decision that I made as an entrepreneur was in 2016. In 2016, we came to a point with our magazine. So we have podcasts, we have websites, we have, like, you know, several magazines. So 2 magazines and several podcasts, etc. In 2016, I came to the point where I made my first deliberate entrepreneurial decision. So up until then, I was going through the motions. I was just doing things. I was just trying things. I was just like being, like, you know, very productive, but not really. I didn't really have a direction. Really, I felt like it wasn't really clear what it is that I was here to do, and what problem it was that I was solving. Right? Like, and this is really exactly what I'm challenging you guys to ask yourself, maybe a little earlier than me. Basically, what problem are you solving for whom? That's the big question of entrepreneurship. It's very simple. If you are solving someone's problem, and usually you can tell by qualifying it like this, you usually solve someone's problem if you're either able to save them money, save them time, or give them new information that they previously didn't have, right? Those are 3 very good qualifying, and I'm not saying they're the only ones, but those are 3 very good foundational qualifying checks to see if you have a product or you have a service that people will be willing to spend money on. Okay? So, and I think this is very important to consider when you go forward with any idea that you have or try to build a business. So, but about 5 years ago, I decided to start Orbis Terra Media. And so Orbis Terra Media for me was my first conscious decision of saying, like, look, let's face it, you're not going to go into employment. You want to stay an entrepreneur. And even though I work with my family, Orbis Terra Media was essentially that part where my family put me in charge from the beginning on my own. I do work with my sisters. They're part of the board, and, like, we discuss everything together, but it's really been sort of like my baby and my conscious decision of, like, doing this. And what I really tried to understand was, like, what kind of skills do I have now after these years of publishing the magazine? Like, what are we good at, right? And so I realized, okay, so we're very good at building brands. We're very good at creating content. So what does that make us a fit for? And then we realized, well, very simply, we would be very good at content marketing because that combines essentially all the skills that we have. And let me have a look. How many businesses in the world actually currently need content marketing? Thousands. Thousands of businesses around the world are trying to figure out how to use content and content marketing to reach their audience. And so we built Orbis Terra Media. And so for me, that was the first part where it became more deliberate, and where now I'm engaged in a much more deliberate sort of like entrepreneurial mindset. Okay? So this is our magazine, by the way, if anyone wants to go check it out sometime.
How do you pronounce it again?
Tharawat.
Tharawat. And what is it mean?
So Tharawat is the plural word in Arabic of the word tharawa, and it means fortunes of life, basically. So fortune, not just financial, but spiritual, emotional, and everything. So we felt, because it's a family business magazine, that kind of like sort of like sums it up nicely. Okay. So just briefly before we really go to your questions or whatever you want to ask me, or if you're done with me as well, that's perfectly fine. I get it. So here we are with like the sort of like the pressures that we sort of discern. My sisters and I have very frequent discussions about how we feel about being entrepreneurs and what it means to us, and like kind of what the pressures are that we've been feeling. And I think that what you'll probably realize, and I hope that you agree with me on this, and please raise your hand if you want to, like, definitely there's probably more of these actually, but I really like to distinguish between pressures that we have internally and pressures that we have externally as entrepreneurs, right? Like, so what puts pressure on us? What makes this hard? And what makes this also something that needs to be a bit of a deliberate choice, because it is not going to become easier ever. It's just you become more resilient, basically. You become better at managing the pressures. So external pressures, which I think are very important to us women, with the economic pressure, like the fact that making money, right? Like, so for those of us where that matters, like that's a big thing, to make money. That's an external pressure. The social pressure, so how do our peers, our friends sort of like around us sort of like react to our, like, you know, our endeavors? Like, you know, do you have the kind of friends around you that will shoot down any idea you have? Do you have a lot of friends around you that are always negative, right? Like, I don't know if you guys recognize this person, but the person that will always be like, oh, but you know, why would you bother? Like, you will never make it, like it's never going to work and stuff like that. We all have those people around us, and it depends on what kind of a social circle you're part of. Those voices are louder than in other cases, right? Like, so this is something to maybe think about in terms of like how that influences your own perception of what's possible and what's not, right? So, and then there's the family. My God, guys, like I can't even start here. Like, you know, you'd have me here in a therapy session. Trust me, if I unpacked, like, you know, I mean, family is a big thing. Family is a huge thing. It's probably the thing that makes it either possible for you to mentally overcome certain points or not, to do what you want to do. I've developed a lot of coping mechanisms over the years to sort of like work around patterns in families. Like, I recommend anyone who's up against like family pressures that are overwhelming to look into, to read about family dynamics, to read about how to break these patterns, because I'll be very honest with you guys, that's not going to change unless you change. Like, the family dynamics can only change if you yourself change, and if you change your strategy. Okay, I'm happy to go into more depth if it really interests anyone particularly, but that's very important. Then there's a cultural challenge, of course, like the cultural pressure, like, you know, what is culturally expected of you, like within your cultural context, what is expected of you as a woman of a certain age, or as a man of a certain age, and like in a certain level of society, what are the expectations of your culture? So these are all pressures, right? Like that weigh on us as we figure out whether we want to be an entrepreneur, or as we are an entrepreneur. And these pressures continue. The more important pressures though, and I think that the external pressures actually stop mattering a lot once you figure out the internal part here, okay? So the internal pressures that we really are exposed to are things like, and I don't know, like self-doubt. We're always faced with that. We have to, the pressure of improving our skills levels, right? Like, we have to get better at everything we do all the time, because that's like a big thing to remain competitive. It's not like you've ever arrived. I just took another degree basically, and I'm going to take another one end of this year, right? Like we have to constantly improve our skill sets. It's a big pressure because it's a competitive market, especially if I look in Pakistan, like you are a very numerous population, and it's hard for you guys to stand out. And you have to consider that constant education needs to be part of your way of going about these things, because your skills levels have to continue to grow. Ego, so I love talking about ego because ego actually stands in the way of most entrepreneurial success. If you feel your ego, like your self-worth and your identity and your ego is attached to the outcome or the success of your business, you will choke it to death. Okay? As an entrepreneur, one of the first things that you have to learn is you have to leave your ego at the door when you come to work in the morning. Because you're going to have to deal with a lot of rejection, a lot of people saying, nope, you're not good enough. I've been called everything from silly, irrelevant, incompetent, everything under the sun, like all the in words that you can imagine, like I've been called them in my career, right? More or less explicitly. And it's really something that you have to understand. If you are the kind of person who you allow that to affect your ego and you let your ego act up, you're probably not going to be able to grow as a person, and you're definitely not going to be able to grow a business. Because if a business is there just to gratify your ego, it's not commercially viable and you won't be able to scale it. Unless, of course, you just want to be a freelancer and you say, like, I don't need to grow anything particularly or something like that. But even then, you will be confronted with a lot of that sort of like keeping your ego in check. And the big one is health. I want to talk about that for a sec because it's really important to me that I'm heard on this one, because I learned that very late and I'm still learning it. So I am what you call a workaholic. And I severely underestimated in my first years, in the first 12 years that I've been working now, how badly stress can affect your health. And how dangerous that is. Like how dangerous it is when you start neglecting your health. And I'm talking your physical health and your mental health. Physical and mental health are the cornerstones of your success to being an entrepreneur, but also to being just a successful career woman, whatever career you choose. Or actually, I would say probably just a successful woman in general, like a happy person in general, right? Like, so I think health is something, and I think now everyone probably can hear this better because of the COVID era, but I like to stress it again. It's not just about not catching COVID. It's about, are you asking yourself regularly how you feel in the morning when you get up? Are you asking yourself are you constantly feeling tired? Are you constantly feeling down? Do you have severe mood swings? Guys, that's not normal, by the way. You need to challenge that. You need to challenge yourself and ask yourself, without feeling that you're sick, you're not maybe sick, but you need to challenge yourself to be like, ooh, that's unnecessary. Why have I been tired every morning this week? Like, what's happening? Like, then maybe my iron levels are low, I'm not drinking enough water, I'm not sleeping enough. Most of these things are easy to fix, but if we don't question how we feel from time to time, and if we don't question even mental patterns from time to time, then sickness can take root, right? You become sick over time because you neglect these things. And I'm not saying, I'm the opposite of a hypochondriac, unfortunately, because I don't listen to my body for a very long time, which is very bad. But I do appreciate the balance today of saying, like, you need that pressure is there. You need to make sure your health is good and strong. And that is also brings so many other advantages because you can see everything with a much better sense of humor when you do. So basically, finally, like just as a few like sort of like lessons learned, and then I'll let you guys please talk because I'm so sick of my own voice by now. So please take over after this. I want to tell you guys something. Like, look, if you want to be an entrepreneur, or like if you are an entrepreneur, some of you guys probably already are. I know how you guys are. Like, I mean, for me, Pakistan, when I came to visit, the couple of times that I've been, and the many people that I know, for you guys, entrepreneurship, it's like in your blood. And I don't think that anyone needs to teach that to you guys. I don't think that it's such an entrepreneurial society. It's insane. I think that, so no one needs to teach anyone in Pakistan how to be an entrepreneur because it's there. Like always been that kind of an entrepreneurial society. I think as women, you need to look at it slightly differently. Okay, that's what I think. And I also think that these are the few things that I've learned the hard way that I hope that you can maybe avoid or that maybe you can take away from this talk. Okay, so I want to tell you guys that sometimes things go wrong and you need to not get caught in the drama. Okay, when you start working, whatever it is, like, you know, when you start working in your career or when you're an entrepreneur, you gotta cut the drama. The drama is the enemy. Don't go where the drama is. I mean it, guys. Like, I know it's attractive to think of your life as a soap opera, but it's a drain of energy, okay? And it's not a good place to be, and it's not a good place to be creative, okay? So cut the drama. When you see drama coming, cut it. But allow things to go wrong, because mistakes happen and it's fine, and you will recover, right? Like, it's totally okay, but don't get discouraged, okay? Don't let the drama take over. And I already mentioned this one. I don't think it's about passion, but it's about adding value. If you want to be an entrepreneur, your primary goal needs to be to add value. And this is also a little bit linked to the ego discussion, okay? If it's just about your passion, then you have an ego problem. Entrepreneurs are people who solve problems for other people through their products, etc. If you are in the lucky position, like I am, where what you do as an entrepreneur that serves other people also happens to be what you love doing, that's the perfect combination. Most of us, though, will go through various instances where that is not the case. I have had to work on things for years that I wasn't particularly passionate about, was very successful at, though, entrepreneurially, and because it was a problem that needed to be solved. And it was not necessarily something that was up my alley, but we were the right people to do it, right? So I think just don't get confused about what it's supposed to be. Ask for help and find mentors. I mean, that I really, ladies, honestly, that I really wish someone had told me that I was allowed to do that. Like, seriously, like, just please, just ask, find mentors, find mentorship, okay? Like, find, and please here, like, find women and men, like, you know, mix it up. Like, you really need to have people that are established or like that are going through the same thing. I have like 4 or 5 mentors at the same time. You know, and this is not even an official thing that I don't necessarily tell them you're my mentor. These are just people I go to ask advice and to ask them to say, like, okay, give me feedback. What do you think? This is what I'm doing. What do you think? Like, you know, please, because this is, if I had known that this was available to me, that so many people would actually be willing to talk to me. I didn't know at the beginning of my career that there are all these people out there that are more than happy to share. Like, you know, that are more than happy to tell you their story, right? Like, it's amazing how many people are willing to, so generous, right? Like, look for them inside your family, outside your family, in your circle, outside your circle, in your industry, outside your industry, right? Like, it doesn't have to be another creative. On the contrary, actually, go talk to someone who is in finance. Go talk to someone who is, like, you know, in an engineer or in tech, right? Like, because it's very interesting what you can learn about yourself and about the world. So that's one real. And then beware of the princess trap. Now I might become very unpopular with this one. The princess trap. All right. So I grew up with Disney movies. I love them, like, you know, for what it's worth. And maybe this generation is less so, but I love my Disney movies. I love my Disney princesses and stuff like that. I'm essentially a very romantic person, very sappy person. So, but I'll tell you something, what I've come to realize for us as women, there's something called a princess trap. Societies tell us in a weird way, subliminally, a lot of the time, that femininity comes with equating to the princess, basically, right? Like, so it's about beauty and elegance and softness and all of these things. And I think it's a dangerous game we're playing here, and it's a dangerous one. And I just want to say this much about this, because I think it's culturally sensitive. I understand that everyone has a totally different view of this, but I'll tell you something. First of all, you have to understand your looks and your youth. They're fantastic things to have. Please enjoy, but they will fade. So they cannot be the only competitive advantage you have. Whatever you do, whatever advantages you gain through your looks or through your youth, enjoy them. They're yours. You deserve them. But never count on them entirely. And the princess trap for me is you need to select the people around you very carefully. If you're endowed with good looks, if you're endowed with youth, you need to be careful that the people around you support you for the right reasons. Admiration is a trap for women in their careers. Who doesn't like to hear, oh, you're so beautiful, oh my god, you're so like, you're a wonderful wife, you're a wonderful this and that and stuff like that. You know, guys, like honestly, it's lovely to hear. And sometimes I tell my husband to say that to me because I feel like he doesn't say it enough. Say it right now. And he has to read the script, like, you know, you're the best, you're beautiful, etc. You know, all of those things. But the thing is that it's dangerous from the outside world. What you want is to surround yourself with people that tell you, I admire you for your strength. I admire you for your skills. I admire you for your purpose. I admire you for the things that are going to last for your whole life. Because don't forget one thing. You think we're in a corner as women, we're letting ourselves be put in that corner very often, and we do it to each other.
Exactly.
How often do we judge each other based on our looks, based on our ability to get married, based on our ability to have children? How often do we do that to other women? And you know what the funny part is? That's where they win and we lose. So I'm going to tell you the other thing is that you uplift other women and you will be successful. I promise you that. Make sure you're part of other people's success. Don't only focus on your own. Be part of other people's success. Lift them up. Because that will last. Those relationships will last. That will get you far. Okay? It's just very important to realize that. I know some of you might disagree with me on this and everything, but I think that for me, it's personally, this was an important lesson to learn. Personally, I have had conversations with a lot of my friends that have experienced the same revelation, that this is actually a trap. This, like the complimenting and the admiration bit, like you have to be very careful how much you enjoy it and how much of your self-worth you derive from it, right? And the last lesson, guys, is just the stress and the FOMO, right? Like, I think stress is really like stress and FOMO. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this term FOMO. It's like fear of missing out, right? Like fear of missing out. Like I'm sure that you all have this as well sometimes, like, you know, all the social media going on, like, you know, are you being seen? Like, are you missing out on something? It's like sort of that peer pressure that's there and everything like that. Yeah. I'm sure that you guys as creatives, you also understand you can't go to that place, right? Like if you want to create, if you want to implement, if you want to work, there needs to be a space in your head where you can isolate yourself from all of that noise and just be like, focus. And don't get distracted by all of everything that's going on, because it's really about quality in the end, not quantity. And I know that's a difficult thing maybe to accept in a time where I've just shown you guys how much happens per minute on the internet, which is kind of stressful in itself. But trust me, it's honestly the case. If you can provide quality and if you know how to portray that quality and explain that quality, you will succeed. And there's no need to be stressed out and there's no need to have fear of missing out. Just focus on finding those lasting things that make you good at things. Focus on becoming really good at things. And that is what's going to carry you through, basically. So yeah, thanks, guys. That was my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ramia. It was a wonderful one because the kind of breadth and depth to that presentation was like amazing, because we could relate to that very much, because we are in the new media technologies and the girls are into that kind of courses, and now they can see it very clearly that where they are, like whether they are doing something or not, but they are still contributing to it, and how they can strategically participate into that. That's a wonderful message I think we have got from this one. And I love the way you talked about that, like if you want to go into entrepreneurial ventures, then how you should plan it strategically instead of like going for passion, because normally we go do things out of passion. That's the right way of doing it. That was a very, very, I think, good message for the girls that what they should be doing and how they should be contributing in the new kind of setting, or especially after post-COVID setting, that what they should be doing. I think we can take questions from girls. Girls, would you like to ask questions? Anything around entrepreneurship, or if you have, like, if you have a family business and you want to extend it, like Ramya, if you want to talk about that and around that, it's up to you. Yes.
We floored them.
They will ask questions. Let them think.
Sarah, I think.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to ask a few questions.
Please.
First of all, I just want to say that it was really very helpful and kind of mind blowing at times too, because a lot of things that I didn't know and I learned from this lecture. So I don't particularly have a question, but I have a few doubts about this. So one of those is like, so my father is really into this business and all of this. So he really wants all of us children to be a part of this too. So he says that, you guys, you should have good ideas because the younger generation. You're very much up to date. So like, come up with ideas, and I will help you run your businesses. And so we sit late at night and we just contemplate, because as it turns out, we have skills, and we do think that, everybody has like a distinct quality as well, but it's just we don't know where to start because we are students as well. So especially coming from a Pakistani background, very few young people being very successful, as opposed to a lot of other countries, because things are different. But we want to start our own businesses. We have a few ideas, but like, what would be like a good advice that you can give to us, kind of immature people?
Sarah, thank you so much for that question. Very important. I do think maybe some of you actually might be faced with the family business scenario. Sarah, the first thing that I would say is, like, I like to do this thing where you first start to untangle your thinking and your emotions in why you're doing this, right? Like, so I, for instance, like I told you, my career started because I literally didn't know how to say no to my father. So my dad comes up to me and he goes like, make a magazine, and I just did it, right? And so I kind of understand that dynamic really well. I think the first step is to untangle the why you're doing it, right? Like, so I'm not sure if this resonates with you, interrupt me if it doesn't, but building businesses or coming forward with ideas has to be a functional thing and not a means of pleasing or impressing your parent. So the first level of untangling is on the emotional level. If you want anything to work business-wise, you need to understand that there are multiple emotions playing on you right now. The one is like, he's put you in a position of jump, my children, and I'll see who goes highest, right? Kind of a situation, which is a very typical parent thing to do. Sorry, Sarah, do you want to say something?
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, I think that first of all, understand that there's no winning that ever. There's no satisfying them ever, and I'm saying this with a lot of love because, like, I love my parents, and but there's never. You know what I'm saying? Like, for you as well, there will never be that level of recognition that will satisfy that need, right? Like, that's a different need. So first, start by uncoupling that, and then really try to have a very rational, very pragmatic discussion about it. So when you say, like, for instance, I'd love to hear from you to tell me, like, how it is that you guys are documenting the ideas that you have. Okay, so it's very simple. The best thing to do is to go for the first, easiest, closest by problem that you can see. Something that is really close to you, something that almost seems like, there's not really a big deal, but something that is super familiar and that you can solve quickly. Not something that requires like massive amounts of time and stuff like that. Start at a very pragmatic, at a very small level, okay? and start solving a problem that you face every day or that your father's business right now faces every day. Start there. Because I'll tell you what that does. It's small, maybe in the sense of like, it's not going to be flashy, you know, you're not going to be in Forbes or you're not going to be in the newspaper for it, but it'll have such an immediate effect on the family business. It'll solve such an important problem immediately that I call it a quick win in the family business. Okay, so instead of just thinking out like, you know, big things and new things and stuff like that, the flashiest thing is not always the best thing, entrepreneurially speaking, right? Like I speak of all these tech opportunities, not because I think that every business needs to revolve around them. It's because, as I told you before, the consumer is in that world and we need to be aware of that. But take the smallest problem that you can possibly solve that's basically next door to you, that you can walk to, that you can examine. And then, Sarah, I think one of the things that my siblings and I really realized, we have to do the research and the work, right? Like there's no exceptions. We don't know anything going in. Like we have to accept that. Don't think that you know. Like grab the idea and then assume that you know nothing, and then do your research and your due diligence. Because what really is important here in the family business to succeed and to gain credibility is that you show the process. Not just, here's the finished product. Look, we made a new shoe. No, this is how we went about it, because that's the learning. And that's what the benefits the family business the most, is identifying who is good at what, because it's the family members that need to take over eventually, right? Does that make sense to you, Sarah? Like what I'm saying, does that resonate?
Yes, it does. It really does.
Okay, great.
So yeah, I was gonna say that like what you said, that it's not about passion. Um, but the thing with us is that all we have is passion right now as students, and coming from this field, that's all my mind revolves around, like design and stuff like that. And so I was just watching this video the other day. If you know him, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad,
For that, yeah.
and same thing. He said that it's not about passion. So many people say that I want to do what I love, I want to follow my passion, but by the end of the day, how are you going to make it work if you don't know how the market is going on? So that is important to understand, and I completely agree with you. And the problem here is that, like I said, we have ideas, and we kind of think that this is a great idea. I think this is great, and then we sit on the dining table and we discuss it with our father, and him being experienced and all, and he says, "Yeah, I mean, it's good, but like you didn't see this, and that, all these shortcomings that it has," and then you're like, "Oh yeah, right."
Yeah, Sarah, he's not the right person to ask. He's just one opinion. He's not the market. And he'll be the first one to support me in me saying this to you. You want to make your case? You don't share the idea with him until you've interviewed 20 people to ask them if they're facing the same challenge. Come to him with the data. Don't come to him with ideas. Tell him, I went around, I interviewed 20 people to ask them these 5 questions. These are my results. Do we have a valid proposition? Let's go for a MVP, minimum viable product. Quickly turn it around, fail quickly, let go of it quickly if it doesn't work, or then steer the course. But you know what I mean? Again, this comes into the validation discussion. If you're just pitching new ideas to your father, it's getting his approval. That's the foremost thing. That's not business pitching. Business pitching is you having an idea, checking it, validating it outside of the family, and then coming back with proof and documentation and a proper presentation saying market size, this is what people said to me in qualitative interviews, etc. This is how you do that. And that is an incontestable then, because then it's not just, oh, we have a gut feeling about like, oh, this is going to work and stuff like that. How relative is that, Sarah, right? Like, I mean, first of all, for instance, your father only has the experience of his generation. You might know much more about your generation and their consumer habits than he ever will. And because he can't relate, he might shoot down an idea that's actually super, super interesting, right? Like, I mean, and so that's why you need to get the market proof in very early on. So go talk to people, test it out with them, and that'll allow you to have a different kind of conversation. That's not so much about, is Dad impressed? if he says yes to my idea, he loves me. If he doesn't, then he doesn't love me, right? Like it's kind of that conditioning that they do with us. It's really very, I told my father the other day, it's so messed up what you're doing sometimes, like, you're not even aware of it. He means so well. It's not a mean thing to do, but it's just like, it's in the habits, right? Like you need to break out of that. Yeah.
So don't indulge yourself into emotions. It's better to plan it strategically. Then come to him. Then he won't be able to refuse it because you would have evidence of that.
Save your energies, guys. Like, I think ladies, like we all know that there's certain conversations. If we keep having, like someone once told me that, and I really realized that, like apparently the definition of insanity is if you approach the same problem with the same strategy over and over again, expecting a different outcome. That's literally the behavior of an insane person. All right. So my advice is don't be an insane person. Don't keep on applying the same strategy to the same situation, hoping that it will be different this time, because it won't. That's not how you're going to get there. If this strategy doesn't work, another strategy has to come in. And this means challenging your own patterns and sometimes asking yourself, well, what are my triggers? I think with family, like you have to be very careful. Like my father also, like, my dad, when I want to please him, I'm 35, Sarah, I imagine I'm much older than you, right? Like, so I still want to please him so badly. It's not even funny. Like I want him to be proud of me. I want him to tell me that. Like, and then with my mom, it's even worse. Like, when my mom isn't happy with me, like, I still have to fight myself and say, like, you're an adult, get over it. Like, you're going to disappoint them. It's fine. But I think so but for the business side, it's really important to understand that the motivation needs to come from the right corner, and you will be successful. I'm very sure, Sarah, because if you have the ideas, like this is just a follow up on that. Like, how do you bring the ideas to the table, to the family table? That's what's going to make the difference. And they're going to be so shocked if you come in suddenly saying, like, I don't just have an idea, I have a presentation and I have data. Right?
I'm pretty sure you'll be quite happy with that. Kind of presentations and data and like strategic planning. So yeah, thanks for that. I'll work on that.
No worries.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay, Ji. Anybody else? Do they want to do something else in the future? Entrepreneurship, or are they like any of you is already doing something related to entrepreneurship? They want to ask any question around that?
Yeah, is anyone doing anything, guys? Like, are you running a small business, or do you have like something happening on the side to your studies? You don't have to ask me a question. You can also just share. Like, I'd love to hear it.
That'd be nice. Or if anybody is thinking that they want to run a business. I just want to ask one analytic. I don't know. I should be familiar with that. What is the difference between business and entrepreneurship? Why do we use these words separately? Why we I think that business is something else, which is a bigger thing, or entrepreneurship is something which is like can be offshoots of something. Is it right, or it's just my?
No, I think technically speaking, entrepreneurship is a behavior that enables business.
Okay.
Right? Business is essentially a phenomenon of transactions, value-adding transactions. Entrepreneurship is a behavior that enables business, that builds business as a phenomenon. It's not necessarily equating to like business size, because entrepreneurship is always part of business. Like whether it's a multinational conglomerate or whether it's a startup. We often talk about entrepreneurship only with startups, but entrepreneurship is a behavior that actually has a place in every part of the life cycle of a business, whether you're dealing with a 100-year-old business or a 5-year-old business. So that's how I've been taught it and how I see it as well. Like, does that answer?
Because normally when we hear by entrepreneurship, I think that we are talking about small businesses or something like that. We are always related with that. So yeah.
I almost say like it's not just a behavior. For me, it's almost like a lifestyle. Really it's a lifestyle, right? Like because when you're an entrepreneur, when you truly embrace entrepreneurship as your state of mind, then I mean, I'm also an employee in some of my family businesses, right? Like I'm not like constantly in charge of everything. Like I'm also, in some instances, my role is to be on the board. I'm a number two somewhere, right? Like with my sisters, for instance, and they're the boss. And so I think entrepreneurship is not just about like, you know, you're the founder of a business or something like that, but it's about just how you approach things, how you think about things. So yeah, I would describe it more as that basically. It spans much more across your whole life actually than it does just about how you run your career and what you do. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Yeah. So,
well, if anyone has questions,
yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has questions that they don't want to ask in the forum, like that can happen too, right? I'm on all social media. Just hit me up. It's fine. Like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere you want. And so whenever you want to like ask me a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer it in writing as well. Okay, so don't be shy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ramia, for this wonderful session. We have learned a lot from you, more than we expected. So it was really nice to have you here, and like the kind of advice you're giving to the girls, and which like they can learn from that, and then they can apply that actually in their business strategies or entrepreneur strategies in like now or even that would be very helpful. Thank you so much for finding out time for this, and making us learn so much from you.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, and all the best of luck to you all, okay? I look forward to seeing what you all make of these things. All right. Bye.
Okay, we see you. Bye. Khuda Hafiz.